New intelligence has led the Department of Energy to join the FBI in concluding that a lab leak in Wuhan, China, was responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it's been 3 years since the start of the pandemic, and you may remember that suggesting the virus was created in a lab was once not only called a lie, but also a conspiracy theory, and also racist. Things have changed. But what does this new disclosure reveal about our federal bureaucracy and its ability to lead? Joining me now to discuss this and more is U.S. Representative Rich McCormick. He serves on 3 House congressional committees, as well as the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. He represents the 6th Congressional District of Georgia. Congressman McCormick, welcome to Washington Watch.
Good to see you today.
It's good to see you, and I also believe this is the first time that you have been with us on Washington Watch, so I just want to take a moment and welcome you on behalf of our audience to Congress, and just thank you for being here, and give you a chance to just tell us very briefly what got you to this point.
It's my pleasure. Some of it's just a continuation of my service. I was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot for about 16 years, did some airborne time, served some time in the Persian Gulf, Africa, the Far East. Then got into medicine and actually joined the Navy, stationed at a Marine Corps base with my last duty station in Afghanistan as the head of emergency medicine in 2016. Was an emergency medicine physician practicing in the civilian world during the entire pandemic, and actually got angry with some of the people in my own party on some of the things that were happening. And it got me involved. And here I am sitting in front of you as a guy who's never been in politics, never went to a meeting, never went to a fundraiser, never knew a politician until I decided to run for Congress. And God willing, I'll be a great representative for people who just want to make a difference.
And it is people like you that we want in Congress. And so we are grateful that you are there and that you are with us today. And I want to get right into the stories here. The Department of Energy making news unintentionally, but this leaked memo about their position saying that it was, in their judgment, the most likely explanation at this point that the coronavirus is caused by a Wuhan leak of the virus. What's your reaction to this?
I think it makes total sense. As a physician and somebody who's probably the only person in Congress who's treated thousands of patients who had coronavirus. If you think about the epidemiology of this disease and how it could occur, one thing they haven't done for those people who thought it came from bats or dogs is continue to test those species to see if it continues to exist in those species. Because if it did, then maybe you could make a case. But if it doesn't, it never came from there in the first place. It makes much more sense that in a city that houses a research center that actually studied SARS-type behavior and actually modified the disease and actually was the epicenter of where this disease began, that makes sense. As a deductive reasoning type person, somebody who's actually thinking about how diseases evolve. And by the way, this took several leaps that wouldn't just happen in realize most viruses that occur in species stay specific to that species. Occasionally you have an avian flu, swine flu, and other diseases, but this one took several leaps. It became very deadly and very specific to humans. And it makes much more sense that it was developed in a Wuhan lab.
Now, one of the interesting parts about this story is not just that information, but the way the discussion about this release has gone. The White House is, of course, being forced to react to this leak. And I want to play a couple different reactions and then get your reaction to their reaction. This is John Kirby, who's the coordinator for strategic communications now at National Security Council. Let's play clip 1.
There's not been a definitive conclusion, so it's difficult for me to say, nor should I feel like I should have to defend press reporting about a possible preliminary indication here. What the president wants is facts. He wants the whole government designed to go get those facts, and that's what we're doing.
Congressman McCormick, I'm going to play one more, but right there we're hearing that the president wants facts. Now here's Jake Sullivan. He's the National Security Advisor, and he had an exchange with Dana Bash at CNN over the weekend. Let's play clip 3.
Did the coronavirus pandemic start in a lab? Is that what you believe now?
Well, Dana, there is a variety of views in the intelligence community. Some elements of the intelligence community have reached conclusions on one side, some on the other. A number of them have said they just don't have enough information to be sure.
Now, Congressman, I actually kind of like these responses. They're saying we need to get facts. There's a variety of positions. We don't know anything for sure. Why has it taken 3 years for us to get to the point where we want to make the facts, we want to wait for the facts to come in before we have very strong opinions?
You will never have the facts because China is resisting any sort of investigation of this that would be fair and accurate. That makes me, once again, by deductive reasoning, suspect that even more that it was developed in the Wuhan lab. One of the things that drives me crazy, they talk about facts and searching for the truth, and yet the entire time anybody stepped out of line with what the government said was the most likely cause, which turns out to be the least likely cause, they stifled us, they censored us, they called us crazies. They even talked about our treatments of the disease or even any sort of origins of modification. Anything contrary to the government's opinion was entirely censored, and actually we got threatened. I remember when we talked about masks or treatments or the origins of the disease, anytime I had anything contrary to what the government believed, not based on facts, by the way, but based on opinion, right, based on their chosen experts, I was literally stifled. I was censored, and I was threatened even with my own licensing. That's the problem with their quote unquote facts and search for the truth.
And I think that's how a lot of America feels about this. Measured responses are helpful, but we should have started there. Now, Congressman, one thing that's interesting about all of this is kind of the knee-jerk reaction early on to deny the possibility. And if you look through the record, and we don't have time right now, people like Dr. Fauci were pretty confident that this did not come from a lab. That seemed to be a fringe, or at least there was an attempt to frame that as a fringe response. I understand why the Chinese government would want to label that as a fringe response and deny that as some kind of conspiracy theory. But why were there so many voices in the United States, even within the United States government, that wanted to marginalize that theory?
I think we'll be asking that question in hearings because that is a legitimate question that they can't answer right now. Why were they jumping to conclusions without the facts? Why were they demonizing anybody who has sincere questions on the origins of this, which would actually point to a nation that had harmful effects on the rest of the world? And there's going to be not only just health consequences, but financial consequences for decades to come.
Yeah. Now, Congressman, I want to switch topics with you a bit because you serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. China, speaking of China, continuing to, has called the U.S. sanctions on Chinese companies involved with Russia illegal, because we now know that China has in recent weeks getting much cozier with the Russian government, supporting their invasion of Ukraine. What are your thoughts on this idea that U.S. sanctions on Chinese companies because of their involvement with Russia is illegal?
Well, there's nothing illegal about sanctions. That's something that we do all the time. We've done it to Russia. We've done it to Iran. We've done it to other countries. Anytime, this is what we do in governments. We sanction governments to play bad ball. Anybody who has ill intent towards what the world is trying to accomplish, I mean, you're going to have people gang up on you. There is a new axis of evil. I think we could definitely say that China, Iran, and Russia are playing bad games, trying to harm people. I've seen the pictures. I've seen the evidence of what's happening in Ukraine. You can honestly say this is a country that was invaded by a foreign government. Their sovereignty has been overrun. We're seeing Europe and the United States and other countries unite behind a country that's been abused. We should not have China or Iran or anybody else aiding a country who's doing something obviously wrong.
How do you think the United States should be responding to this growing partnership between Russia and China?
I think you're seeing it right now. I think we're coordinating with other countries to sanction. I think this is what puts people into a situation where they have to choose a side. This is a world economy. This is a world power struggle. There are forces of good and evil at hand. There's people who get to determine their own destiny. There's other countries that think that a ruling class of government gets to determine everybody's destiny. And this is what we're fighting for in the very heart of the American politics. Who is control of your life? Is it the individual or is it the government? And we're not just fighting that over against a foreign country such as China or Russia, but right here in the United States, who gets to determine your own destiny? All along, what's made America the most unique, successful country in world history, the greatest country to ever live, is because we've empowered people over government, and that is in jeopardy right now.
Amen to that, Congressman. Over the weekend, ABC host David Muir asked President Biden about the spending in Ukraine. Here's their exchange, and then I'm going to give you a chance to respond. Let's play clip 5.
We know the vast majority of Americans support Ukraine. But there are now many who are asking, how long can we spend like this?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure how many are asking. I know the mega crowd is. The right-wing Republicans are, talking about we can't do this.
Congressman, what's your reaction to that?
I think he's politicizing something that should not be politicized, just like they did with coronavirus. Every time they hear something they don't like, they try to blame it on the far right. These are legitimate questions. If you're going to help a country, you have accountability. It shouldn't be food. I do think we should have a strong response against an invading Russia. I think it is a coordinated effort between at least 30 nations right now. But I think we have to make sure that we answer the people's concerns. That's how you maintain a popular support of any conflict, is by answering questions, having accountability, having transparency, and you shouldn't be foo-fooing anybody's concerns when it comes to their hard-earned tax dollars.
And that's a very fair point. And there is a thread there in these stories that you point out there. When we first were asking questions about the potential of this virus being released from a Wuhan lab, those were referred to as xenophobic and racist questions for even raising those questions. Now, when a question is raised, how much money should we spend on Ukraine? Is it infinite? Those are signs that you are a MAGA Republican, which we all know is not supposed to be a good thing these days. Congressman, you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. What's your hope for the situation in Ukraine? How is this going to be resolved, or when is it going to be resolved?
It was good to see when we were both in Munich and Brussels recently to see a bunch of countries come together for the first time in a very long time, decide that what we talked about before, which is you have to support your own national defense. You have to put at least 2% of your GDP involved in securing your own defense, like they agreed to many, many years ago, which Trump called them out on. And they didn't take it seriously. And even a year ago, they were saying, oh, Russia's not going to invade. They're not going to invade. And all of a sudden they did. And now you're seeing a bunch of countries scramble. And they're actually stepping up, though. What I like about it is it's drawn countries like Germany into the fray. They've actually become closer to the United States. They're starting to understand the significance of a strong military. There's other countries all on the Baltic and the Balkans.
Congressman?
Stepping up, and they're going to do their part. And I think it's a good thing to unite us.
Congressman Rich McCormick, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.